Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. Post-draft, we're going to be on a little sabbatical. Going to take a little golf vacation next week, Phil. Going to be out of town, North Carolina, honing my game. And but we still have some loose ends to tie up. So today we're going to hit on Drake Maye, who had a media availability on Thursday. Also talk about Stefon Diggs and the trickle-down effect of his intensity. Former fifth-round pick. Do you think he might be able to chew on some asses in that locker room of guys who were taken in rounds prior to him, who haven't peed a drop in the league, who think they're pretty good? Also, Eliot Wolf with some interesting comments on Drake Maye, the leader. But I want to start off, Phil, with just one observation on the Bill Belichick situation. And how you doing, guy?
I'm fantastic, but I'm fascinated to hear your observation.
It's very clear that Bill, maybe not at the point of a bayonet, but somewhat reluctantly decided to write a book that he didn't want to call The Art of Winning. He wanted to call Do Your Job, as you've seen in any number of emails or whatever else, his conversations. But the publisher made him do it, called it The Art of Winning. Somebody made him write the book. I don't think Bill really wanted to write the book, but there was probably an idea that, hey, might as well. I mean, you're out there, you're going to coach UNC, might as well do it. So he wrote basically the same book that Charlie Pierce wrote 20 years ago, The Education of a Coach.
That was David Halberstam. David Halberstam. R.I.P.
Okay. What was the friggin'... Well, Charlie Pierce wrote the Brady book. Be that as it may. The interesting thing about this is Bill wants to be asked about the book, about the art of winning and his lessons in leadership and winning. And to me, if you're going to write this kind of a book, you want to strike while the iron's hot. And the iron is not exactly hot when it comes to Bill Belichick and winning. He was fired by the Patriots, as Robert Kraft eventually acknowledged, after a 4-13 season. He had the greatest quarterback of all time right under his nose and spent 5 years trying to chase his ass out of town, when the greatest quarterback of all time actually said, you know what, enough, I'm going to go someplace else. Lo and behold, he wins a Super Bowl and then is a fairly good friggin' player for the next 2 seasons after that, or one, whatever it was. Bill had a quarterback named Mac Jones, who he surrounded with guys who were ill-equipped to coach him. And as a result, when the kid said, are you sure this is how we should be doing this? Bill got so pissed off at him that he basically exiled him and blew that pick. So between the record, the personnel decisions, the mismanagement, the iron isn't hot to be writing a book about the art of winning. I understand. Greatest football mind of all time. But if Bill thought that this would be the time for people to sit down and say, boy, I really want to get into the mind of this guy who decided he was going to trade Rob Gronkowski before the 2018 season, and who sat Malcolm Butler in the Super Bowl in 2017 and chased Tom Brady out of town and hired Matt Patricia as an offensive coordinator and went 4-13 and has ended up in North Carolina. The iron isn't hot for Bill. And I don't think that he gets that. Or maybe he does get that, and he went on this whole cash in, get my message out there proposition, somewhat against his will and reluctantly. I think the publisher convinced him. I think people around him convinced him. But I don't think that anyone was thirsty for a Bill Belichick coaching and leadership book at this juncture. The tell-all, if he does tell-all, that will sell volumes, multiple printings. This one, not as much.
Multiple printings, multiple languages.
Yes. So I think that's really, he didn't want to do this. He did it. He wanted it to be done on his terms. No one cares about his thoughts on the art of winning. We heard it all for 20 years. Then they started losing. What happened there?
You know, I would push back just a little bit, because I do think people are interested, whether it's Patriots fans or football fans in general, coming from Bill Belichick himself. He is still so revered as a football mind, what he was, especially at his prime, of course, that you'll get the football dyed-in-the-wool human beings to jump on the book. Tom, when you talk about the iron being hot, I just wonder if it's cooling at such a rapid rate right now that he's going. I genuinely question how long this is going to last at UNC. And not because I thought he would be the head coach there for 10 years. I assumed it would be a couple, and now I'm not sure. If you are at North Carolina, that to me is the most interesting part of this, is you have bosses that you need to answer to. And it's not just, one guy, as it was for so long with Robert Kraft. It's an entire collegiate environment and an entire state. Like, those people are paying your salary. And for things to be coming out in this way, and for you to be the face of that university right now, like it or not, I don't think it could be sitting well right now with those folks. And Tom, we're not even close to the start of football season yet. So that to me is the biggest question. Like, how much can happen between now and the end of August? And how harmed can his reputation get? And will it at all impact his employment opportunities? That's where my mind has gone on this.
It's clear from his statement released on Wednesday that he feels victimized by the media, villainized, and we're just taking another chunk out of his hide, which he understands that he actually acknowledges it in the letter that he wrote, that, well, everybody's seizing upon the things that I up. Yeah. Because we already know, do your job. We already know, ignore the noise. We already know, no days off. We already know there's no I in team, all that other stuff.
Year too early rather than a year too late.
The perfect coach for 18 years. The only team that went to 18-0 before a loss. So we do want to know the ups. Cue Jim Calhoun, Phil. It's one of Phil's all-time favorite quotes. Emeka Okafor.
I got Emeka Okafor, and who was the other one he got?
Not right.
Curran Butler. Curran Butler. I got Emeka Okafor and Curran Butler. You want to say I effed up? I effed up. Ryan Gomes, lighting up UConn, going for 30 plus. That's one of the best clips of all time.
But so Bill thinking that he's going to run a media tour in which they are going to reach out to friendlies in the media. I mean, no one called NBC Sports Boston. I think Dan Shaughnessy got a book, and somehow at some point the Globe and Dan Shaughnessy became friendlies for Bill and Ben Volen. Jim McBride was the only friendly I saw, but Dan was not warm and cozy with Bill for a long time, and I think he likes Ben. Seth Wickersham seemingly has become a friendly now, despite the number of things that ESPN wrote over the years. If you read Seth Wickersham's review of the book, it's fairly fawning. But I just don't think that there was this great thirst and hunger. I mean, I honestly would not have been able to live without reading a Bill Belichick book in 2018, 19, or 20. If this passes across my desk, I'll read it. I'm not going to go pick it up. I mean, it'll be excerpted enough where I see what I need to see. We all live through it. We want to know these things that we don't know. And the fact that Bill is so detached from reality or so accustomed to getting things his way that when he sits down for these interviews, which he knows are going to turn into quote unquote clickbait interviews, well, of course they are, Bill. No one wants to hear do your job. It's 3 words. We get the concept. Explain things in a way that you haven't before. Drop the mask, drop the curtain. No, lift the curtain. But to me, he's just so accustomed to getting things his way that when he is not, like in this instance, and as you can see by the tone in his emails, he is at the point of a bayonet, sounds like threatening North Carolina. I mean, when there was a tweet put out by North Carolina a few weeks ago, and there was all kinds of backlash underneath the tweet attacking both him and Jordan Hudson, Bill said, I can't believe that the University of North Carolina is okay with me being called a predator in the comments. Of course they're not. Bill, why would you frame it that way? Just say clean up the comments or take that tweet down. We don't want to see that. I mean, he's inferring that there's so.
Did he tweet that? I missed that. That's news to me.
It was an email. It was an email.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yes. That was him and Jordan Hudson.
Right.
And then when the Athletic did a Freedom of Information Act appeal, right. And Bill, one of Bill's emails was, so is the University of North Carolina okay with me being called a predator? course they're not. Somebody wasn't monitoring the comments. Clean it up, whatever. But
it is still amazing to me a little bit, Tom, that he has been dealing with media for as long as he has, literally decades, and he never has. Clearly, based on recent events, he never will. He just doesn't really understand the media's job, and I think he just assumes his presence is a favor to them. So you need to be doing things for him that will benefit him and only benefit him. And if they don't, then that's where you're going to get the incredibly awkward, disdainful looks and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that we've had in the past in press conferences. And again, I think it's because well, wait, I thought, are you not on our side? And it's just he just can't get past that. And I always felt that way, especially as it got later with his tenure with the Patriots, and harder questions had to be asked about why the team wasn't doing well. And he just couldn't get it. He just could not comprehend why he had to field some of the things he was asked.
Yeah, I mean, Phil and I lived it. Bill cycled through virtually every beat writer you can imagine on that beat as having most favored nation status. It was Reese. It was me. There was a period of time where it was Phil. It was Jim McBride. I think Bill Burt was on the inner circle way back in the early 2000s. Ordway. But if you gave too much pushback, you would first have it intimated that you were giving too much pushback. And then Bill would start getting cool to you. And the next thing you know, you were at loggerheads. And for me, it really happened in 2017 after the Malcolm Butler decision and the lack of explanation as to why. I said, you know what? I just, the quid pro quo, the flow back of staying on Bill's good side while suspending all curiosity, we're doing our job as, trying to tell people exactly what was going on with the team and trying to explain what the circumstances and situation was with the quarterback or the team in general, or his relationship with Robert Kraft, or the climate around the team. It wasn't reflecting well when I was writing those stories in 2017. But that's how it was. And Bill didn't like that. So as a result, it wasn't a great relationship after about 15 years of getting along great. I finally said, I still have to say what the hell's going on here. Sorry. So, but he does have very much a quid pro quo attitude with the media. You'll get all you need from me in terms of off the record information or in press conference deference and explanation. But if you piss me off, you're not gonna be treated as one of my favorite kids.
Well, and for a long time, right? And I know we don't want to spend the entire podcast on this, but for a long time,
no, I know
he didn't need people in the media the way he does now, quite frankly. And so to go to a place like CBS News, that's not a guy who sees him every day in a press conference at North Carolina or in Foxborough. This is a big time news organization, nationally, programmed Sunday magazine show, and they don't owe him anything. They're not beholden to him in any way. And again, I think he just felt as though, well, my presence here, I'm doing you the favor of sitting down. You need to do me the favor of just asking me about the things that I want to be asked about. And that's not how they operate, because they're a news organization. They're going to ask about the things that are newsworthy. And right now, his relationship with Jordan Hudson is for a lot of people, really newsworthy and interesting. And so, the fact that, and it was a completely softball question about how they met, the fact that he would be surprised by that or what goes on social media, to me is just indicative of the fact that he doesn't really understand how these media interactions really work.
Yeah. And to me, the ironic thing, or probably the thing that he's kicking rocks about now, is I bet he couldn't give two shits if he had written a book or not about the art of winning. I just can't imagine that he had this deep yearning in his soul to unburden himself of all the elements that led to the Patriots' success. I mean, you can have 2 paragraphs. Tom Brady was unbelievable, and boy, do I like Dante Scarnecchia. Done. Sorry, that's unfair. I don't mean that. Okay. Anything else on that?
No, I think we're good for now.
Did we cover some new ground here? I think.
A little bit.
I mean, I want to talk.
Little
Yeah,
bit.
I thought so too.
Yeah.
He didn't need to write this book. He wrote the book reluctantly and thought that,
Did he definitely? Do you know this? Do you know this? Or are you saying with any knowledge?
I just know him really well. I just know him really well. And my feeling is, especially the tenor of those emails, the way he has spoken to the publisher in the emails made it sound like, look, I went along with this shit to go and talk to CBS. I went along with this stuff to let these people read these books early. And this is how I knew it was going to go. And it went the way that I thought it was going to go. Let me just talk to my people, like Susie Welch and Ray, whoever it is, and it'll go fine. I don't give a shit what anybody at the Globe, Herald, Vanity Fair, or any place else has to say about my book, because I know how it's going to go. You know, Eliot Wolf talked to Sirius NFL Radio, Phil, and he talked about Drake Maye, and this is what Eliot Wolf said about Drake Maye. See this, if this is an eyebrow raiser or not. It's not to me, but I think some people will think that it is. Drake's been a consummate teammate and worker. I think that's the first thing that stands out. He also has some talent. So anytime you can combine the three of those things, you got a chance to be pretty good. Eliot Wolf has seen a thing or two over the years. So he's come in, he's just put his head down and worked. I think one area I know he's going to take a step forward and has already is his leadership. As a rookie, maybe you feel like it's not your place to speak up, but those times are over for him now. It's going to be a lot of people looking to him for those leadership moments, and he's certainly up to the task. So the onus, the yoke of leadership has been put on Drake Maye's shoulders by none other than Eliot Wolf. But I don't think Eliot, observing that Drake was a more lead by example, kind of test the water here. I'm 21. I'm not going to scream at people and tell them how it should be done in 2024, is an indictment of how Drake was last year. Phil, your thoughts on Eliot Wolf's comments on Drake Maye?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You know, I do know at certain points last year, especially early last year, they were hoping to see more from him. The football staff was hoping to see more from him in terms of his, grabbing the team by the collar and saying, come follow me, guys. And listen, I think the situation they put him in last year maybe stunted his development last year because he was trying to be a good teammate and he was trying to defer to the guy that they wanted to be the starting quarterback, which was Jacoby Brissett. So how do you want him to lead when you're asking him to sit on the bench? Even though he proved himself in training camp, in my opinion at least, to be the better quarterback. Anybody who was watching those practices or those preseason games, you could see there was certainly more immediate upside in starting Drake Maye than there was Jacoby Brissett.
Just a quick note here. Again, love Gerard, terrific coach, but just think how convoluted that was. From the spring on, we were being told Jacoby's the starter. So Drake went with the marching orders that Phil's talking about. All right, I'm going to be the backup here. I'm going to learn how to do things. By the end of camp, it's Drake. Take the job. We want you to take the job. And Drake outplayed Jacoby is the message at the end of training camp. So it's just the mixed messaging, Phil. So you're exactly right. They didn't make it clear. What am I supposed to be doing here? Am I supposed to be a hard-ass rookie or am I supposed to be a seen and not heard rookie?
So for Eliot to mention that as to me, that's sort of the cliched, area of improvement that any young player, especially quarterback, can make going from year one to year two. But to say as a rookie, maybe you feel like it's not your place to speak up, but those times are over for him now. It's like, well, you didn't really put him in a position where it was his team. If you wanted it to be his team, the results might have been a little bit different. And maybe eventually, maybe what he's talking about is, okay, eventually he became the starter though. So yeah, we totally understood why he was quieter than maybe we wanted to, while Jacoby Brissett was going through and taking every rep as a starter and not every rep, 70% of the reps as a starter, and then starting all those games. But eventually it was his team, and maybe they still didn't see everything they wanted to see. But by that time, the season had kind of gone off the rails, Tom. I mean, they just waited, in my opinion, they waited too long, and they were not holding true to the best player's going to play thing, which I think every team needs to live and die by. And so, that's on you as a team builder or a coaching staff to not provide the team a better quarterbacking option to make it clear who the guy should be, because it was muddled from the very beginning. So, I don't read this necessarily as a critique, although I could see how you would. But to me, it's a little unfair to criticize his ability to lead, given the situation last year with Brissett and then the timing of when he actually got in and how the team was performing. I mean, you're going to ask the guy to go into like one of the worst, one of the least talented locker rooms in football and start stomping his feet around and throwing his helmet and saying, guys, we need to do better. Like, okay, tell us how. Because we got Vidarian Lowe at left tackle and DeMontre Jacobs, God bless them both, at right tackle, and we can't block anybody. Ben Brown looks like our best offensive lineman at times, and that guy didn't have a team, when the season began. So, like, a little bit of a difficult situation to be expecting a lot of leadership from a 22-year-old guy. Not to make excuses
take
for
better
him.
than mine. No, I like your take better than mine. I'm kind of hardwired for the nothing to see here type thing, but Phil's take's much better. Yep. Good job by you, Phil.
Well, and he is going to have to do it. He was asked about, leadership today. We had a chance to talk to him a little bit earlier today, and I know we're going to get into it, but that was one of the things he was asked about, was about his leadership. I think it was even before Eliot spoke to SiriusXM. And
let's go right.
Yeah, let's get into that.
Let's jump into that. Let's jump into that leadership quote while we have it. Here it is.
I mean, not something that obviously comes with position, and I like to hopefully call myself this year a leader, and I think working towards that. I think just earning the guys' respect. A lot of new faces in here. Come in here and work hard, and show those guys that we picked up in free agency, or the rookies, or guys we picked up. Just kind of my work ethic. I think kind of start off from that standpoint. Show the coaches. I think once you get new staff and new players, you want to show them, hey, it's not relaxed time. I think once I'm going to be the starter, just keep things pushing forward, and whether it's saying more, and whether in walkthrough or little things like that, just kind of build that and not focus too much on it. Just hopefully it comes natural.
So there he is on leadership. Also, he was talked about working with Josh McDaniels too, which I'd love to get into that, because I think there's kind of a blank slate for McDaniels to create on with Drake Maye and with this entire offense. And I know that Greg Bedard alluded to it, saying that the time that Josh spent in the offseason, both with professional and college programs, and the amount that he learned kind of puts him in a position where he can try a lot of new things. And Bedard, at least, who I know does his job well and talks to people, he believes that this Patriots offense is going to be pretty intriguing. Here's what Drake Maye, though, had to say about McDaniels as his offensive coordinator.
Yeah, Coach's been great. I think the guys last year I really enjoyed, and so far Coach McDaniels, it's been awesome. I think he his ways, he does it. He's been offensive coordinator, been head coach, does it at a high level. His stuff works. The kind of proof's in the pudding. He's coached a lot of different guys. He coached the best to ever do it, so it's pretty cool getting to watch old things to Tom and see how he does it, and a bunch of different guys play at a high level in the offense. Not just Tom. So it's been cool to watch, and I'm kind of learning the ways.
Phil, what was your impression of the overall tenor of Drake Maye today?
I thought confident, relaxed. I did like that comment that we just played on leadership, where he said, you don't want to force it. Like, that to me sounds like a guy who's been on a lot of teams, who's probably been around some people who tried to force it as leaders, and that doesn't work, like, at any level. So, you just want to show guys through your actions and through your work ethic. And occasionally he is going to have to speak up. And remember, we all did stories on it at the time last year. There was a time during the season, mid-season, where things were going poorly, and he stood up in front of the room and he talked about how they needed to be better. And so he, I think he's shown that, and I think he's comfortable with that. And so that's how he came off to me today, was comfortable, even though there's a new offense and there's a new head coach. I did find it interesting that when I asked him about his input in the offense, he feels as though he has it. And he has the ability to talk to Josh McDaniels about the things that he likes and doesn't like, and the things he liked even from last year, or things that he has seen from Josh McDaniels' offense in previous years, and what he likes there, and the concepts that might work for him. So I do think we're going to see, for anybody who's concerned about, Drake Maye being thrust into the Tom Brady offense, quote unquote, of course there will be elements of that, and the language, I'm sure, will be similar in a lot of ways. But based on Josh's work with college teams and maybe even pro teams last year, and what he's seen from Drake Maye and the kind of athlete that he knows he is, you're gonna see Josh McDaniels, leverage what he has in terms of talent at his disposal. He has done nothing but prove that over the years, whether it's changing the offense with Cam Newton or the 2 tight ends or the fullback or, even the trick plays. Like he is not unwilling to press every button and pull every lever to put points on the board. So I think you're going to see some real creativity from McDaniels, and it sounds like Maye's going to have real input in terms of the kind of creativity we see over the course of the year.
I think that actually dovetails nicely with the other thing I want to hit on here, and that's leadership and ownership and taking charge of things. And the plight of the wide receivers last year, it probably started with the fact that they had an inexperienced wide receivers coach. It probably trickled over to the fact that Alex Van Pelt was more of a player's coach, it seemed, as an offensive coordinator. I thought he had a pretty good year relative to what he had to work with. But there was no real person in the wide receiver room who's going to chew on asses. Kendrick Bourne's a smiling, happy guy. When he did pipe up after the ill-fated trip abroad, I think some of the players got pissed off that Kendrick Bourne yelled at him. Do you remember that correctly as well, Phil?
Oh yeah. I mean, Bourne made it even pretty clear with some public commentary that he wasn't thrilled with how that trip went. And we know, and I reported at the time that Javon Baker missed curfew, and so that was, I think, just one instance of probably many over the course of the year, where it became clear to the people who were professionals, whether it was on the coaching staff or guys like Bourne who were in the room, as players, that the younger receivers in that room were just not meeting the standard, the professional standard that you would come to expect from guys on an NFL roster.
Which brings us to two of the most interesting additions who can actually help Drake Maye with his leadership and help the rest of the offense and maybe the team look at Drake Maye and say, that's the guy you're supposed to listen to. And that's Josh McDaniels, who we've talked about quite a bit, but it's also Stefon Diggs. You spoke to Tyler Dunn, who's covered the league for a long time. He covered Stefon Diggs when he was in Buffalo, and you had him on the Next Pats podcast, and you had a good conversation with Tyler. I'm going to let you set it up here.
Yeah, Tyler has, done a lot in terms of covering the league at large, but especially the Buffalo Bills. And he was just coming off of a sit-down with Bills general manager Brandon Beane. But our conversation eventually transitioned to Diggs and what Diggs might bring the Patriots. And he was really interesting in terms of his description of the impact Diggs had on Buffalo, not just on the field, but in terms of its overall personality, basically as soon as he walked through the doors. So here's Tyler on Stefon Diggs in Buffalo.
Let me ask you this when it comes to Diggs, because he's just so fascinating. And we've only met with him once. But just having spoken to coaches that have worked with him in the past, they just freaking love the guy. They will acknowledge that, like, hey, every once in a while on the sideline, you might have to dodge a helmet that's coming flying at you because he's not thrilled about how things are going in game. But they love the competitiveness. They love the spirit. If there's one, like, the biggest way he will impact the New England Patriots in 2025 will be what, in your opinion, Ty?
Raising the intensity level from whatever it was last year. I don't know. You tell me 1 to 10. What is it, like a 4, a 5? Who knows? It will be an 11.
That might be generous.
He was the electroshock that the Buffalo Bills needed in 2020. And I get it. It ended not well. And it always kind of surprised me how so many of the locals just wanted to boot his ass out of town, and a lot of nasty, just anecdotally talking to friends of friends, family members, it's like, oh, they got rid of that diva. They got rid of that son of a gun. Okay. Clearly there was something going on where there's smoke, there's fire. And there were many players throughout the course of last season that hinted at addition by subtraction behind the scenes when it came to Stefon Diggs. In 2020, he was everything that this young Josh Allen-led team needed. And I had to pull up the story. I remember I did it. This would have been like December, January of that first season of his in Buffalo. I chatted with Chad Hall, wide receivers coach, who Diggs loved. He loved Diggs. Everybody loved Chad Hall. He's going to do great stuff with the New York Giants as an assistant quarterbacks coach now too. But here's how he put Diggs's impact. He said, he's a 2008 Air Force grad himself, Chad Hall. Quote, he's like a middle linebacker, man. He's your alpha, but he's your damn dog. He's tough as shit. He's mean as shit. I'm a military guy, and I'd want him in my foxhole. I'd want to be back-to-back with him. I know he's going to take care of me. I know I'm going to take care of him. That's the kind of guy he is. You want him in your foxhole. So that and it was like that stuff again and again. The Bills were one of these teams just in purgatory. You're talking 17 years without making the playoffs. They needed a star who wanted to be there in the first place, and they needed that star to just kind of elevate and push players, push teammates, and it's not always going to be pretty. Yeah, he was in Josh Allen's face. And then no, Josh Allen is not the kind of guy that's going to yell back. That's just not who. Look, you'll never see Josh Allen ream out a teammate ever. It's just not what he does. He's not going to ball up the fist in the coach's office and demand something. And maybe he should. But for that team at that time, they needed Diggs. Now he was what, 5 years younger. So I don't know where he's at off of an injury. He's probably going to be more of a slot. He's going to have to get a little craftier. His game has changed so much, but just off the field, I think that it's going to be great. And it's crazy because I think the narrative is, oh, he's going to be awful for a young quarterback. I think he was great for Josh Allen when Josh Allen was young. He was great for C.J. Stroud in year 2. I think he's going to be great for Drake Maye in year 2.
Patriots have to hope that he is, and I don't know if he'll even be ready for week 1. It looks like, we're going off of what he's telling us and social media videos, and like he actually looks like he's moving pretty well for a guy who's on the wrong side of 30 years old and coming off a torn ACL. Like it looks pretty impressive, but you never know. Like Kendrick Bourne was coming off a torn ACL, suffered basically a year to the day before Diggs was, and I think he missed over a month last year before he actually got back to practice and eventually got back on the field. So it's tough. It's tough for guys, especially that age, to try to rush your way back. But he'll be a big boost for them whenever he does, because like the on the field stuff is one thing, and I think you're right. He probably projects more as a slot guy. I know that's how they felt about him in Houston, but just intensity wise, like that. That's something they've needed alphas. Like Jabril Peppers was really kind of like the one guy in there who was like really like pissed off after losses. And like, I think, really demanding more of the people around him and himself, and doing so with volume,
Yeah.
and like you add Diggs to that mix, and who know, maybe Will Campbell is one of those guys. He's, everything you want apparently when it comes to football character and leadership. And so, you start to stockpile some of these guys, and maybe eventually Drake Maye finds his voice and becomes that, that leader type too. And, they're kind of cooking something up here in New England. Who knows?
The ironic thing about you talking to Tyler about that is earlier in the week, I was speaking to an offensive coach, and it was mentioned that the Patriots offense right now in the wide receiver room, basically you can look at Diggs, Bourne, Douglas, Hollins, and then after that, and Kyle Williams, and then after that, the other three, and they're going to continue to be called the other three until one stands out. Javon Baker, Jalen Polk, and Kayshon Boutte, they're all kind of playing for their jobs. And it was pointed out to me that, Stefon Diggs might have been a pain in the ass on the sidelines to quarterbacks, and he might have been a little bit of a prima donna, and he might be hard to deal with. But nobody practices harder than he does. Nobody is more cutthroat in terms of competition during games or in practice, and nobody is less reluctant than Stefon Diggs to say something if he doesn't think performance is up to what it should be. So I think it'll be very interesting for those three players, because they're in a sink or swim situation, not just with, I would think, McDaniels, with the wide receivers coach. Refresh my memory on him.
Todd Downing.
Todd Downing.
Who's had some experience with Diggs in Minnesota. They crossed over there.
And Stefon Diggs. So it's sink or swim for those three, I think. But there could be a significant look. They're either going to rise with the tide that Diggs will bring with him, presumably, or they'll drown in it. But it's an interesting dynamic when you think about it, right, Phil?
No question.
Agree with me.
Yeah. Listen, when you hear Tyler talk about like him giving an entire organization an electroshock in terms of its intensity and ratcheting it up. I mean, that's what you and I complained about it all year last year. The roster was what it was. We would acknowledge that, but there just wasn't much urgency, and there really would, throughout the organization for years now, there hasn't been enough urgency, in my opinion. This is a guy who is towards the tail end of his career, who is one of the most intense competitors that the league has seen, certainly, you know, at his position. You know, he's among them in a long time. And so that's the kind of jolt, I think, that could really benefit them when you pair him with a head coach that we all view as being an intense human being himself, an intensely competitive himself, and has a track record of being that way. And, you know, maybe some of these new additions, you know, Morgan Moses, but, you know, the podium sound that we have heard from him will get you ready to run through a wall. Same deal for, you know, Will Campbell the moment after he's drafted. Like, it does feel like they are going to get some urgent and some driven competitors that are not going to look at this roster and say, still not great. Like, we'll probably get him next year, though. It's just not going to be the case. And that's how it was all last year, in my opinion. And that led to a bad team performing even worse than it should have. So I think it's a really good thing for the Patriots to have Diggs, whether or not he's, you know, even going to be available to start the season. Just to have that guy around, I think, could benefit some people in there.
All right. Phil, we covered a lot of ground here. You know that?
Heck yeah. We always do.
Yeah, we do. Kept that tight. About a half an hour of your time. I got to go on with WEEI right now. Like I said, no Patriots Talk podcast next week. Going down to play golf. Okay?
I love that. What are we going to average for scores? Just let the people know, like, how well it's going to go based on how you feel about your game right now.
I've never played better. Never been better as a golfer. I had a simulator. Fortunately for me, I was able to put a simulator in my garage. Never been better, Phil. Okay? Right now, I'm carrying an 8.7 handicap, or an 8.7 and falling.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think you're even better than that.
Started the season at a 10.4, and we're just putting up score after score after score. I've been over 85 in like 6 rounds, but I'm probably going to come back, you know, just twisted into a small pretzel by courses that I don't play all the time. So we could go 91, 93, 91, 91, 81.
I don't see that happening. You're a smart golfer too, because on the simulator you're playing a number of different courses. So I know you're not pushing
all
it.
these courses. That's a great thing. I've played every course on the simulator. They're going to go play down there.
Unbelievable. I hope.
All right.
I hope you don't take any money from your friends while you're down there.
You know who I'm playing golf with tomorrow, Phil? You do, actually. I've told you.
Oh, I do. Yeah, tell the people.
Yeah, former Quick Slants co-host Kyle Van Noy. He and I communicate on the golf front, and I let Kyle. I just sent him a text the other day. He said, "Bro, I'm gonna be up on Friday. You want to play?" I said, "Yeah, definitely."
That is not what he sounds
So
like.
we're playing at 12:10. It kind of was. You liked my Maz earlier today when I was explaining it. Maz had I played with Felger and Maz on Thursday, and Maz had 3 profane meltdowns. And the best one was on the 9th hole, which is right near the clubhouse. It was quiet because there weren't that many people out there on a Thursday morning. And Maz hit a putt from a long way away uphill, and it just took off. And it was an important hole. And he just yelled, "You ready, everybody? Hold on. Stop."
See, it didn't come through. I think you were so loud. The microphone's refusing to pick it up. It's too loud. You got to do it. You got to do it you got to do it much quieter.
Stop.
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah, that's better. You just
Took off, Mike. Oh, I suck. Yeah, that was good.
Maz, take it easy on those putts.
You're right,
Mike.
I suck. Oh, just flailing at it. I'm like Marty Barrett out here.
Van Noy's supposed to be a pretty good guy. All the guy does, I'm looking at his Twitter right now. All the guy does is tweet and post videos of him golfing.
Yeah, it's just like me.
He better be nasty.
All right, we got EEI coming up right now.
All right, go ahead. Go do your work.
Later, bruv.
See you, buddy.